You ever have a day so surreal you wonder if you're trapped in a satire about the end of common sense? Because let me tell you, nothing wakes you up faster than hearing. You have exactly 60 seconds to get this pile of medical waste off my dock before I have you arrested for visual pollution. Barked at your father by a woman who looks like she was designed in a high-end laboratory and assembled with zero empathy. It was 7 a.m., Tuesday, and the fog should have been hugging the lake, keeping everything quiet. But Serafina Vane shattered the peace, standing there in her powder blue suit, looking like she could slice granite if she spun too quick. And she was screaming at my dad, my old man, Silas, who sat in his wheelchair, hand shaking a little as he fished quietly. He wasn't bothering anyone, just tracking invasive carp to keep their numbers down, his eyes locked on the water like he was reading an ancient story. But to Serafina, he was an eyesore. A threat to her waterfront property values. Behind her, two private security goons in tactical vests. Overkill for a place where the wildest threat is a raccoon. We're already sizing up Dad's chair. One of them kicked his specimen bucket straight into the lake, sent it sinking. That's when my morning turned inside out. I came out of the trees in oil-stained cargo pants, flannel shirt, hydraulic wrench in hand. Boots hitting the dock with a rhythm that made the guard hesitate. He saw the look in my eye and did the math. Minimum wage versus getting flattened by a wrench. Serafina curled her lip, pearls gleaming. Oh look, the gardener's here to collect the trash. Get him off the dock. You're violating bylaw 49.2. Unsightly medical equipment in a recreational zone. I just knelt by my dad, checked his pulse, made sure his blood pressure wasn't going haywire. His eyes told me he was thinking about the fish, the water, not about himself. I stood, faced her. You just kicked a specimen containment unit into the lake, threatened a disabled man who's performing a critical service for your community. You ought to apologize, get that bucket, and let him work. She let out a laugh, so dry it could have blown away on the wind. He's a vagrant stealing fish from my lake. This is a private amenity, Mr. Sterling. We own the water. We own the view. Right now, I own you. 5 minutes, or I call the sheriff. I glanced at the multi-million-dollar pump station downshore, designed to keep her lake pristine. You own the pump, Serafina. You don't understand the water. Force us out, and you're making a mistake you can't afford. She called my bluff, dialed 911, told the dispatcher there were aggressive transients on her property. I wheeled my dad away, but I knew what she'd just done. Pulled the pin on a biological grenade that was going to blow her empire to pieces in 48 hours. See, to Serenity Falls, I was just Thorne Sterling, the messy son of the old guy in the busted farmhouse on the ridge. They figured I was broke, stuck here out of bad luck. What they didn't know, 48 hours before Dockgate, I'd been up in our hayloft, analyzing geological scans on a military-grade server rack. I'm not a gardener. I'm a hydrological engineer. Spent 15 years with the Army Corps of Engineers, building fail-safes for dams and war zones. I understand water, how it moves, breathes, and how it'll bite you if you don't respect it. When Dad had his stroke, I took leave, came home to activate the Sterling Water Pact, an old federal land patent giving our property protection as a critical watershed. Our creek's the source for this whole valley. 20 years ago, when Serenity Falls HOA built their subdivision, they illegally dammed that creek, built their lake, started selling million-dollar waterfront dreams. My father, a professor of limnology, knew what they'd done. He never sued, never yelled. He just outsmarted them. Here's the twist. The water here's rich with nutrients that attract Myxobelis carp, ugly bottom feeders with a talent for eating the kind of slime algae that'll choke a high-tech filtration system in weeks. Dad quietly managed the carp, keeping the algae in check, so their $2 million filter never clogged. He did it for free, out of love for the water. Never mind if he hated the HOA folks. Serafina didn't know any of this, but she just fired her last line of defense. Dad looked at me as we headed home, worried about the slime. I know, Dad, I said. That beautiful lake, shimmering in the morning light, was now a ticking time bomb. I sat down with the pump's public schematics. The Model X 9000 nanomatrix filtration unit has a 0.5% tolerance for organics. I did the math. With no cart management, slime would double every 6 hours. Filters would clog in 2 days. The system would melt itself. This wasn't sabotage. This was letting nature run its course. Now that the HOA had booted its only real caretaker, I drafted a compliance notice. As of this date, we cease all biological interaction with the lake per HOA demand. No more fishing. No more equipment. Full responsibility for ecosystem management is transferred to HOA. I handed it to Serafina. She barely looked up, signed it with a flourish, called me trash, and waved me out. By signing this, you accept responsibility for the reservoir's ecosystem, I said. She laughed. It's a pool, not an ecosystem. We use chlorine. That's when I knew the comedy was about to become a tragedy. That night, I texted Kale, a structural engineer buddy, Phase 1 active. The fail-safe is pulled. He just sent back a popcorn emoji. The first 24 hours? Quiet. The lake looked peaceful, but I knew the war had started. Residents were out on paddle boards. Serafina was giving tours, bragging about cleaning up the neighborhood. But down below, the slime was blooming. Dad asked, "Is it starting?" "Not yet," I said. Nature doesn't rush. Day 2. My remote sensors showed the pump intake's flow rate dropping, viscosity spiking. In the HOA's group chat, yes, I'd hacked their Wi-Fi. Complaints started rolling in. Why is my shower pressure so low? Infinity pool water looks oily. Serafina told them it was routine calibration. I watched her crank the pump to 105%. By evening, the smell hit, a sweet, rotting scent of out-of-control algae bloom. I drove to the perimeter fence as the pump screamed. Serafina and the sheriff confronted me. "What did you do?" she shrieked. I shrugged, told her, "I did what you asked. I stopped all maintenance." The pump's whine turned into a rhythmic thumping, cavitation bubbles forming as the system tried to suck a vacuum. "You should shut it down now," I warned. She just cranked it higher. "We're flushing your poison out." I headed home. At 8:14 p.m., the pump house lights died. Black smoke billowed from the station, a thunderclap echoing up the valley. Dad and I watched from the porch as chaos broke out below. The heart of Serenity Falls had just burned itself out. Next morning, the lake was a swamp. The smell carried all the way up to our porch. A mob of 50 residents stormed my gate, Serafina with her megaphone screaming for my arrest. I walked out, just me, a tablet, and the facts. "You burned out your own system," I said, showing them the data. "For 20 years, my father managed the carp that kept your system alive. He was your filter. You kicked him out." The crowd went quiet. Serafina sputtered, "It's tech. We don't need fish." I shook my head. "You need nature, and you try to pave over it." Then she snapped, ordered her security to cut my fence, brought up an excavator, announced she was seizing the upstream flow. Sheriff tried to talk her down. She threatened his badge. The excavator crossed the line, started digging into federally protected land. I called on my old clearance. "Commander Sterling, Alpha 9 Zulu, Class 1 watershed breach." Within minutes, black helicopters thundered in. Army Corps and Department of the Interior agents swarmed the scene. Serafina went from queen bee to terrified bystander in seconds. The lead agent saluted me. "Commander Sterling, report." I laid it out. Illegal excavation, potential aquifer contamination. The crowd's jaws dropped as the director addressed Serafina. "Ma'am, the man you're yelling at is the senior advisor to the National Water Security Bureau. You just invaded a protected water reserve." It was over. They arrested her on the spot. Federal water pollution, sabotage, unauthorized excavation. Her light blue suit was caked in mud as she screamed, "You ruined paradise." I told her it wasn't paradise. It was a parasite, and the host just shook you off. As the SUV doors slammed shut, the crowd looked to me, suddenly realizing they needed the gardener to fix what their president had destroyed. Sheriff Miller, newly humbled, asked what we could do. "You want water? I can open the gravity-fed bypass on the old infrastructure. It'll be clean, just not as pretty, maybe a little silt." The crowd was desperate, didn't care. "There's a condition," I said. "Water belongs to the Sterling Trust. You'll pay usage fees to a conservation fund for restoration and education." and you apologize to my father." They agreed, dissolved the HOA board on the spot, and waved at Dad, sitting on the porch. The Army Corps and I dug up the bypass valve, buried under Serafina's decorative bark. My old hydraulic wrench did the trick. The valve squealed, water rushed, and soon sprinklers down in the valley sputtered to life. There was cheering. The lake took weeks to recover, but Serafina was gone. Audits showed she'd embezzled HOA funds, taken loans against property that now smelled like pond scum. Each household was slapped with a huge assessment, but they blamed her, not us. 6 months later, Serenity Falls had changed. The water was darker, healthier, reeds lined the shore, protected habitat signs replaced no trespassing. My dad was on the dock, teaching kids to fish, explaining the balance. "Even the ugly fish?" one girl asked. "Especially the ugly fish," Dad said. "They do the dirty work." Dave, the man in the polo, now a friend, came by. "You thinking of buying Serafina's mansion?" "Nah," I laughed, "but it'd make a fine community center. Teach people what actually keeps their values up. Not property, not tech, respect." That morning, the lake sparkled, not with chemical shine, but with the deep gleam of a real ecosystem. Dad helped a girl unhook her sunfish, watch her release it. Serafina's house sat empty, a tombstone for unchecked arrogance. The first payment to the Sterling Conservation Fund came through, enough to restore the barn, upgrade the sensors, maybe even get Dad a research boat. In the end, we didn't just defend our land. We showed a whole community what really matters. Not the view from your window, but the integrity of what lies beneath. If this story gave you even a moment of satisfaction, hit like and subscribe. And tell me, when have you seen arrogance get what it deserved? Ever stood your ground for something real? Drop your story below. Sometimes, all it takes is one person with the facts, a wrench, and a little patience to remind the world that you can't outsmart nature or justice for long.